He currently works at the Australian War Memorial as an information assistant and is studying his degree in military history at the Australian Defence Force Academy in Canberra. Please make welcome Gary Trainer.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning, everybody, in particular veterans of the Vietnam conflict. I'd just like to start, if I can, with the third stanza of a poem written by a man by the name of John McCrae. John McCrae was a veteran himself of the First World War. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold up high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. As Tony indicated, my name is Gary Trainer, and I'm 45 years old. Now, some of you people are saying, what has that got to do with anything? Well, for those of you who heard the radio this morning and heard Tony's interview on 2EC, you'll note that today is the 45th anniversary of the Battle for Long Tan. For Australia, 1966, the year that I was born, was going to be a very big year. I was just over 1 month old when decimal currency was introduced. I was merely 4 months old when our first national serviceman lost his life in the Vietnam War, Private Errol Nowak. I was just 5 months old when the first Australian task force established its base at Nui Dat. And I was just cutting my first teeth when the Battle for Long Tan was fought on the 18th of August 1966. I was still in nappies when HMAS Hobart became the first of 4 Royal Australian Navy destroyers to operate in the US Navy's 7th Fleet on the gun line off the coast of Vietnam. And I was barely walking when RAAF Canberra aircraft of No. 2 Squadron were deployed to Vietnam to serve with the 35th Tactical Fighter Wing, United States Air Force. Not long after my 2nd birthday, the Tet Offensive began. And I was still being sung to sleep by a song being played by my mother on an old 45 RPM record player by Rolf Harris called Jake the Peg, when the fire support bases at Balmoral and Coral were being defended by Australian troops. Now, for those of you who remember any of these things, I'm not trying to make you feel old. That's truly not my intent, and I apologise if I do. But just 3 days ago, a very small minority of our community took the time to commemorate the 66th anniversary of VP Day, also known as Victory over Japan, and it was an event which passed almost unnoticed amongst our community. To put things into perspective for you veterans standing here today, when some of you veterans were born, Australian troops were fighting on the Kokoda Track. If you were born during the year 1943, you may be aware that our diggers captured Finch Haven in the Pacific on that year. If you were born in 1944, then you may know that our diggers were fighting at a place called Shaggy Ridge in the Finisterre Ranges of Papua New Guinea. And if you were born in 1945, then you will know that our forces were landing at Tarakan and Balikpapan, just to name a few, in the Pacific. The men born during those years would find themselves in Vietnam a short time later. Just as many of you who were born in that era are blissfully unaware of the happenings of the Second World War, I have very little memory as an Australian of your war. Despite the fact that Vietnam was the first televised conflict and was playing out in my parents' lounge room, I was too young to know what was going on in your part of the world. But what I do remember is being dragged along as a young boy to the Anzac Day marches. My father himself was a Second World War veteran, and I was made to attend the march every April. I have a vivid memory of old men who, by this time, would have been in their 80s. The jinking and the jiggling of swing-mounted medals, and almost endless formations of men and women who fought during the First World War, who sadly are no longer with us. I consider it a privilege to have witnessed the marching of our first Anzacs. They were followed by the veterans of the Second World War, who at that time were still quite sprightly and in their 50s, and also the veterans of the Korean War. Just this year, I took my 6-year-old son to the Anzac Day March at Bermagui. Sadly, at his age, he will never get to meet a First World War veteran. And with the ranks of our Second World War veterans starting to thin, I'm sorry to say he will have very little memory of the diggers of the Second World War. But this year, at the age of 6, he took a curious interest in the men and women who marched in the Bermagui parade. No doubt the sight and sound of their medals caught his eye, and he asked me, "Who are they?" My response was automatic. I said, "They are the diggers." Now, I don't know if many of you veterans here regard yourself as diggers, but I certainly hope you do, because it's an honour which I feel needs to be carried on. Most of the people in the Bermagui March were in fact Vietnam veterans, ably supported by our national servicemen and women, with a sprinkling of current serving members wearing their recent campaign medals. It occurred to me that when my 6-year-old boy reaches adulthood, it will be you men and women who are standing before me here today who he actually remembers as being the diggers on Anzac Day. When John McCrae, the Canadian poet, wrote of that torch, "To you from failing hands I throw," he was talking about the generations which followed. The First World War veterans, as I've mentioned, have all gone now. Metaphorically, they passed that torch onto the veterans of the Second World War. And as our Second World War diggers fade, their failing hands are now passing that responsibility onto you, the Vietnam veterans. One day, you will pass that responsibility onto the men and women who have served in such places such as Cambodia and Rwanda, East Timor and Afghanistan. Terrible as it was, you people endured the Vietnam War, and you are being made unwitting custodians into the legacy that is Anzac. As an employee of the Australian War Memorial who works on the floor, when being asked for directions, you'll be pleased to know that the Vietnam Gallery is one of the most requested and frequented galleries within the establishment. There appears to be a very strong and growing interest in the Vietnam War with young Australians. In particular, the Dust-Off helicopter light and sound show is one that grabs the attention of my 6-year-old boy. And it is this mental image which best paints the picture for my generation of what the Vietnam veterans endured during that conflict, despite the fact that the helicopter scene is only but a small part of what the veterans endured during those years. It is a privilege to work at the Australian War Memorial, but no more privilege than to stand here before you today and speak to you on the 18th of August 2011. At around the same time that John McCrae wrote his poem, another man who also served during the Great War had a vision which would eventually become the Australian War Memorial. The next time you visit that institution, as you walk through the sliding glass doors, I ask that you look up to the left and to take note of the words which Charles Bean left behind. He stated, "Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made." The official count of Australians who died during the Vietnam War is 521. However, this does not include those who died many years later from exposure to chemicals and the other effects of war, including post-traumatic stress disorder. It is their spirit, the spirit of those 521, that lies in the heart of the land they loved. And it is you people here today, especially you veterans, who take the time on a Thursday such as this to attend services such as this, who are preserving that memory. And in the words of Charles Bean, you are guarding the record which those 521 people themselves made. Just as I am proud to belong to a generation that can remember the diggers of the First World War, perhaps one day my son, again who was only 6 years old, will remember the men and women of the Vietnam War who he saw as a little boy march down the main street of Bermagui. And when his son asks him, "Dad, who are they?" then hopefully he will say, "They are the Vietnam veterans. They are our diggers, and lest we forget."
I'd just like to call on a member of the South Vietnamese Army veterans that are present here today. Would you please come forward, please? Michael. Hi. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Dai. Firstly, I would like to thank for the invitation on behalf of the Federation of the Veterans of the Republic of Vietnam in Australia. Today, we are here. It's not to glorify the war, but we would like to say something that it happened in the past. In particular, regarding the company of 6RAR. The company 6RAR was being sent out to replace the Bravo company of 6RAR to operate, to locate the motor base plane somewhere around the base camp of 180F in New Delhi. And after the replacement completed, around 3:30 afternoon, the company of 6RAR was facing some heavy motor fighting as well as the small arm hitting on. And the company had been carry out the encounter attack against a superior forces of the D445 provincial battalion plus 2 regiment of the NVA 274 and 275. And after the whole night plowed through the monsoon rainy season, the next day when the battlefield being settled down, the NVA as well as the local battalion forces have been pulled out, left with 425 dead body, and it is believed that more than 1,000 being carried away either wounded or dead. And unfortunately, the D company of 6RAR left 18 persons killed in action and 32 wounded. And it has been opened a glorious chapter of the Australian military history, in particular for the Vietnam War. And today we are here is to say thanks for Australian being sent the defense forces as well as the civilian to help us to stop the infiltration of the North Vietnamese army, as well as to help us to develop our society. In particular, is to stop the invasion of the communist regime from the north. And after the war, we like to thank Australia have been open their arms widely to accept refugees not be able to live under the brutal regime of the communists of nowadays. And in our mind, we always remember all those persons who have been helping us, not only to stop the invasion of the North Vietnamese
fondness with you, but also with thanks